Welcome to AP Microeconomics Unit 1, the ultimate AP exam review. Here are the key concepts we'll be studying in today's lesson.
Introduction to Economics. What is economics and how is it used? Let's start with what economics is. Economics is the study of how people, businesses, and governments make choices when resources are limited. Economics helps us understand how people make decisions when they can't have everything they want. Economists study these choices to find the best ways to use resources. They use models and theories to explain how economies work and help solve problems such as inflation, unemployment, and economic growth. The economic problem and positive versus normative statements. Think about your own life. You probably want more money, free time, good grades, and maybe a new phone. The problem is you don't have unlimited time or money. This is the economic problem. People have unlimited wants, but resources are limited, so choices must be made. It is also important to understand the difference between positive and normative statements. A positive statement is a fact that can be tested. For example, the unemployment rate of Canada is 6%. A normative statement is an opinion about what should happen. For example, the government should lower taxes. There are two main branches of economics, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics focuses on individual consumers, businesses, and industries. It looks at things like supply and demand, production costs, and labor markets. Macroeconomics looks at the economy as a whole. It focuses on issues such as inflation, unemployment, economic growth, government spending, and international trade. Economic principles and ceteris paribus. There are several key economic principles that we'll use throughout the course. First, we have the economic problem. Because of this, choices must be made and every choice has a cost. People generally act in their own self-interest and make decisions by comparing marginal costs and marginal benefits. This is called marginal analysis, which will be talked about later in the video. Another important concept is ceteris paribus, which means all other things being equal. Economists use this assumption to study the effect of one variable at a time while keeping everything else at a constant. One AP exam tip is to assume ceteris paribus unless the question says otherwise. Let's practice. Pause the video and try the left multiple choice question. Let's go over the left multiple choice answer. That's right, the answer is C. Limited resources cannot satisfy unlimited wants. The economic problem exists because people want more goods and services that can be produced with the resources available. As a result, individuals, businesses, and governments must make choices about how resources are used. Now, try the right one and the free response questions on your own. (1.1) Scarcity and choice. Scarcity and choice. Scarcity and choice are the foundation of economics. Scarcity means there is a limited amount of resources available, but resources are limited. People must make choices about how to use them. This is the basic economic problem we talked about in our introduction. Real-world example of scarcity. Picture this. A city is facing a drought and has a limited water supply. Since there isn't enough water for everyone to use as much as they want, choices must be made. Farmers may receive less water so households have enough to drink. Parks may stop watering the grass, and people may be encouraged to conserve water. This is an example of how scarcity forces individuals, businesses, and governments to make choices about allocating resources.
1.2 Resource Allocation and Economic Systems. An opportunity cost is the value that you could have gained by choosing the next best possible alternative. For example, you decide to go to the mall, but during that time you could have been studying for a big test or hanging out with family. The opportunity cost would be the next best option, which would be studying for your big test. Hanging out with family would not be considered part of the opportunity cost because you would not have chosen it as your next best alternative. What are explicit versus implicit costs? Explicit costs are the traditional out-of-pocket costs associated with making a decision. For example, the price of groceries. Implicit costs are the opportunity costs of making the decision. For example, the money you could have made by picking up an extra shift instead of hanging out with friends. What is an economic resource? A resource is anything that can be used to produce something else. Resources are scarce. The quantity of what you can get is limited and not large enough to satisfy all productive uses. There are 4 resources/factors of production. First, we have capital. Capital is the manufactured goods used to make anything else, like goods and services. In capital, you have things like machinery, factories, buildings, and computers. Secondly, you have entrepreneurship ability. It is the special human resource used in creating something of value from the other three resources. It is the effort of entrepreneurs taking risks to create new enterprises and innovating to develop new products and production processes. For example, you have Bill Gates and the development of Microsoft. Thirdly, you have land. This includes all natural and raw materials used to produce finished goods. For example, you have water, minerals, and woods. Lastly, you have labor. This includes the human effort and work, including the physical and mental talent of the workers in production. You can use the acronym CELL to remember all of these factors of production easily. A common misconception is that capital is money. Capital does not include money. Make sure to not screw this up on your AP exam. In economics, there are the three economic questions. Why do we have these questions? Due to scarcity, every society must answer these three questions. Question 1. What goods and services should be produced? Question 2. How should these goods and services be produced? Question 3. For whom should these goods and services be produced? Or in other words, who consumes these goods and services? An economic system is the way a society organizes the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. They were created because different nations adopted different economic systems to address scarcity. There are three main types of economic systems. First up, we have command economy. This economy is controlled by the government. Industries are publicly owned, and the central authority is making producers and consumer decisions. There is a high degree of economic scarcity due to the government planning, and there is little incentive to work harder. An example of a country with this type of government may be North Korea or Cuba. Secondly, we have market economy. In a market economy, you have private ownership and decisions made by many firms and individuals. There is lots of opportunity to make profit, which gives a lot of people incentive. In this type of economy, you have the government interfering as little as possible. There is lower degree of economic scarcity due to inequality in distribution and a changing business cycle. An example of this type of economy in a country may be the United States or Singapore. Lastly, you have a mixed economy. This economy combines both aspects of command and market economy. Both government and market play a role in economic decisions. Most decisions are made by individuals and the private market, but the government is involved in many key decisions in public services. An example of this in a country may be the United Kingdom or Canada. Let's practice these questions. Pause the video while you try and answer them on your own, and unpause the video when you're ready to hear the answers. Scarcity is the condition where unlimited wants exceed limited conditions. Scarcity forces societies to make choices about how resources will be used because resources are limited. The three questions are what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. One advantage of a market economy is that profit incentives encourage efficiency and innovation in a market economy. One disadvantage of a command economy is that command economies often lack incentives for workers and businesses to improve productivity. Money is not considered a factor of production. Remember, capital does not include money. Strong profit incentives for private businesses is not a characteristic of command economy. This is because there is little incentive to work in a command economy. Now, try these ones on your own time.
Resource allocation brings us to our next topic, the production possibilities curve, also known as PPC. Productivity is a measure of efficiency that shows the number of outputs per unit of input. So, why do businesses and countries want to increase their productivity? Because resources are scarce,
Improving productivity would allow them to produce more with fewer resources. The production possibilities curve is a graph that shows the maximum combinations of two goods an economy can produce using all available resources efficiently. The following 4 assumptions must be made for production possibility curves. Only 2 goods can be produced: full employment of all available resources, fixed resources, and fixed technology. To draw the production possibilities curve, begin by placing one product on the x-axis and the other on the y-axis. Then plot the maximum amounts, which is the maximum amount of each good that can be produced if all resources are devoted to only that product. For example, if 0 cars are produced, then 15 total TVs can be produced. Do the same for cars and TVs. Points inside the curve are called productively inefficient. Points outside the curve are unattainable. The economy does not have enough resources or technology to produce at this point. However, these may become attainable in the future if the PPC shifts outward, which we'll talk about in a minute. To help remember the difference between points inside of the curve and points outside of the curve, I think I for inside, I for inefficient, and O for outside, and O in impossible. The production possibility curve shifts if there is a change in the quantity or quality of resources or technology in an economy. An outward shift is economic growth, meaning the economy can produce more of both goods, which is caused by an increase in resource quality or quantity. An inward shift is an economic decline, meaning the economy can produce less of both goods, which is caused by a decrease in resource quality or quantity. When the economy expands, the PPC also expands outward, whereas when the economy declines, the graph moves inward, which is a decline as well. This is a useful tip for the AP exam as well. There is both a concave and a linear PPC. These depend on the opportunity cost. The law of increasing opportunity cost states that as you produce more of any good, the opportunity cost will increase, as resources are not easily adaptable to producing both goods. The result is a bowed out or concave PPC. A constant opportunity cost is not common. However, resources in this case are easily adaptable for producing a good. The result is a straight line PPC. There are 2 types of efficiency: productive efficiency, which is products being produced in the least costly way. This is any point on the PPC. Then there's allocative efficiency. These are products being produced at a value most desired by society. On the PPC curve, there is an optimal point, which is dependent on the desire of society. For example, on the PPC graph on the right, points A, B, and C are all productively efficient as they are all on the PPC. However, only point C is allocatively efficient because it is the amount of healthcare and education desired by the society. Let's try some practice multiple choice and free response questions. Pause the video and check your answer. Which of the following would cause a production possibilities curve to shift outward? And, using the graph on the right, which points on this graph are productively efficient, which point on the graph is inefficient, and which point is unattainable? The answer for the multiple choice is C. Improved technology would cause the production possibility curve to shift outward. And the free response question, for number 1, points 3 and 4, for number 2, point 1, and for number 3, point 2.
1.4 Comparative Advantage in Trade. Trade happens when people divide work and each person provides goods in return for other goods. Instead of producing everything themselves, people exchange what they have for what others produce. Comparative advantage is a situation in which an individual, business, or country can produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than another producer. An important concept to understand is that a producer cannot have a comparative advantage in both goods. An absolute advantage is a situation in which an individual, business, or country can produce more of a good or service than any other producer using the same quantity of resources. Specialization and trade. Specialization and trade allow people or countries to produce more efficiently. Both countries can benefit from trade if they have a relatively low opportunity cost. Terms of trade are the agreed-upon conditions that would benefit both countries. An example of specialization and trade would be if you suppose Canada is better at making wheat while France is better at making computers. Each country specializes in what it produces most efficiently. France would export computers and import wheat. Canada would export wheat and import computers. This means that they would trade. Trade benefits both sides because it is cheaper to specialize. Specialization increases total output and allows countries to consume beyond their PPC through trade. Trade creates interdependence between economies, and it shows how opportunity cost influences production decisions and global trade. There are two types of comparative advantage questions: output and input. Output is used when comparing units produced. For output problems, the country that produces the most units has the absolute advantage. To find comparative advantage, calculate opportunity cost using the memory trick output other over. The country with the lowest opportunity cost has the comparative advantage and should specialize in that good. Input is used when comparing time needed to produce goods. For input problems, the country that uses the least time or resources has the absolute advantage. To find comparative advantage, use the memory trick input other under. Again, the country with the lower opportunity cost has the comparative advantage. A good way to remember this for the AP Micro exam is absolute advantage is about output or input, while comparative advantage is always about opportunity cost. Here are two examples of comparative advantage questions. One is input and one is output. Let's start with the output example. David can produce 6 pies and 4 cakes, while William can produce 4 pies and 2 cakes. Since David produces more of both goods, he has the absolute advantage in both pies and cakes. To find who has the comparative advantage in pies, we compare the opportunity cost of producing pies. This is done by using the trick output other over. In this case, William's cost is lower, so William has the comparative advantage in pies. For cakes, David's opportunity cost is lower, so David has the comparative advantage in cakes. This means William should specialize in pies and David should specialize in cakes. For the terms of trade, the trade rate must fall between the opportunity cost of producing a pie, which are 1/2 and 2/3 of a cake. An example of a good trade between the two countries would be 1 pie for 0.6 cakes, because that falls between the two opportunity costs and benefits both sides. Now let's look at the input example. David needs 30 minutes to make a pie and 45 minutes to make a cake. William needs 60 minutes to make a pie and 120 minutes to make a cake. Since David uses less time for both goods, he has the absolute advantage in both pies and cakes. We then calculate opportunity cost. This is done by using the trick input other under. David's opportunity cost of 1 pie is 2/3 of a cake, while William's is 1/2 of a cake. Since William's opportunity cost is lower, he has the comparative advantage in pies. For cakes, David's opportunity cost is 1.5 pies compared to William's 2 pies. Since David's opportunity cost is lower, he has the comparative advantage in cakes. So even though David has the absolute advantage in both goods, David should specialize in cakes and William should specialize in pies, because comparative advantage determines specialization and trade. The terms of trade are the same as before. 1 pie must trade between 1/2 and 2/3 of cake. A trade of 1 pie for 0.6 cakes would benefit both sides. Let's practice these questions. Pause the video while you try and answer them on your own, and unpause the video when you're ready to hear the answers. For multiple choice question number 1, the answer is C. When countries specialize based on comparative advantage and trade, production becomes more efficient. This allows both countries to consume more than they could without trade. For multiple choice question 2, the correct answer is A. The terms of trade must fall between the two countries' opportunity costs, because this is when both countries benefit from the trade. Now, try these ones on your own time.
Cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis. To make rational decisions, economists must use cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis means comparing the total benefits of a decision to the total costs. The goal is to maximize net benefits, which equals to total benefits minus total costs. This process is used by individuals, businesses, and governments whenever they make important decisions. A rational decision occurs when the benefits outweigh the costs. AP exam tip. If benefits are greater than the costs, a rational decision maker would choose that option. Cost-benefit analysis example. Imagine a student is deciding whether to get a part-time job. The benefits may include earning money, gaining work experience, and developing workplace skills. The costs may include less free time and less time for sports. The students must also consider opportunity cost, which is the next best alternative given up. In this case, it can be time spent studying, playing sports, or hanging out with friends. Recall, the opportunity cost is what you sacrifice or miss out on when you choose one option over another. If the benefits of the job outweigh the cost, then taking the job would be considered a rational economic decision. Let's practice. Pause the video and try the left multiple choice question. Let's go over the left multiple choice answer. That's right, the answer is B, comparing total benefits and costs to maximize net benefits. Cost-benefit analysis is the process of comparing the total benefits of a decision with the total cost to determine whether the decision is worthwhile and will maximize net benefits. Now try the right one on your own.
Now for our final topic of Microeconomics Unit 1, Marginal Analysis and Consumer Choice. Marginal analysis compares the additional benefit of an action to the additional cost. Marginal cost is the cost of producing one more unit, and marginal benefit is the benefit of producing one more unit. Consumers make decisions by evaluating marginal benefits and marginal costs. Once marginal cost exceeds marginal benefit, you should stop producing. Optimal quantity is when marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. This is the maximized total benefit point. The equation on the left shows how the consumer's money should be spent so that the marginal utility per dollar of each good equals each other. This is called the utility maximizing rule. For example, buying one more slice of pizza when already full. The first slices provide the highest satisfaction. Each additional slice gives less satisfaction than the previous one. This concept is called diminishing marginal utility. Consumers stop consuming when marginal cost exceeds marginal benefit. Businesses also use marginal analysis when deciding production levels. This explains how consumers make rational choices with limited income and resources. Let's try some practice AP questions. Pause the video and record your answer.
For Part A, the marginal utility per dollar for the third roller coaster ride is 40 divided by 4, which equals 10. For Part B, the marginal utility per dollar for the second rocket ride is 20 divided by 2, which also equals 10. For Part C, the consumer should purchase the first roller coaster ride first because it provides the highest marginal utility per dollar, which is 30. For Part D, utility maximization occurs when the marginal utility per dollar is equal for both roller coaster and rockets. For Part E, the table demonstrates the law of diminishing marginal utility because each additional ride provides less extra satisfaction than the previous one. Now try the multiple choice question on your own, and I will give you the answer at the end of the slide.
Let's quickly review Unit 1. Economics is the study of how people make choices when resources are limited. Because resources are limited and wants are unlimited, scarcity exists, forcing people to make decisions and face opportunity costs, which are the next best alternatives given out. Remember the difference between positive and normative statements. Positive statements are facts, normative statements are opinions. Microeconomics studies individual markets, and macroeconomics studies the economy as a whole. When making decisions, economists use cost-benefit analysis and marginal analysis. If marginal benefits exceed marginal costs, continue. If marginal costs exceed marginal benefits, stop. The 4 factors of production can be remembered using CEL: capital, entrepreneurship, land, and labor. On a PPC, points on a curve are efficient, points inside are inefficient, and points outside are unattainable. More resources or better technology shift the PPC outward. For trade, comparative advantage means lower opportunity cost, while absolute advantage means producing more output or using fewer input. Specialization in trade allow countries to consume beyond their PPC. Finally, market economies rely on private decisions, command economies rely on government decisions, and mixed economies combine both. If you remember these concepts, you'll be ready for your AP exam. Thank you for watching our AP Microeconomics Unit 1 review video. Good luck on your AP exams.